Hi, and welcome into Meet Me in the Movies Open Dialogue. I am Thomas Manning, and recently got a chance to sit down with actor Simon Phillips, talk about a little bit of everything from over the course of his really fascinating career arc. Specifically, we start the conversation talking about his role in the new Netflix series Fubar, starring, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger, which you might have seen some advertisements for. This series will be hitting Netflix on May 25th. And we also, throughout our conversation, talk about some of his other roles, whether he's playing a psychopathic Santa Claus or playing a Texas Chainsaw Massacre type serial killer in the film Butchers. There's just a lot to talk about from his career and sharing the screen with icons such as Bruce Willis and Mark Hamill and Jean-Claude Van Damme. So really hope you enjoy conversation. Once again, we are talking with Simon Phillips about Fubar, among other projects. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Well, Simon, it's great to meet you, and thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me, mate.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So, no, we got a lot to cover, but we can start with Fubar for sure. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is your first time sharing the screen with Arnold. So can you walk me through just some of your general emotions when this opportunity first came across your desk and just
I
what that
mean,
was feeling like?
come on, Arnold Schwarzenegger, first TV show ever. Sort of in the first episode as well. Fubar, it's this great. For anyone that doesn't know what it is, it's going to be on Netflix May 25th. The whole show is dropping. It's action comedy. You know what? For me, it's very similar to True Lies. Like he's an ex-CIA, or he's about to retire. Sorry, he's about to retire from the CIA, and his daughter is also CIA, but they don't know about that. They're with each other, so it's action, a lot of action, a lot of practical effects, which I love a lot of. But it's also a lot of fun because it's comedy. So that's the bit that has me tickled a little bit. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun. So originally, way back when I just auditioned for the show. Sort of it's shot in Toronto. Actually, it's shot in like loads of great places like Argentina and stuff like that. But nobody wanted to fly Simon to all these exotic locations. They're like, do you want to come to a warehouse in Toronto? And I was like, I'd love that. That sounds great. Because it was just me and Arnold and 20 henchmen probably. But, so it was good fun. It was the easiest decision I've ever had to make as an actor, mate. Sort of, I go, absolutely, I'll be there tomorrow.
So what are some of your favorite memories from, watching Arnold movies over the years? Are there any particular roles of his that stand out?
I mean, I'm a big Terminator 2 fan. That's I'm definitely up there with one of my favorite movies of all time. And mine just an Arnold movie, but as an all time, it's one of those rare examples of a movie being better than the sequel is better than the original, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, he's had such a length of career. I mean, I'm a big fan of even the ones that like Commando, sort of the ones that are like lesser, sort of, a bit, I guess, campy, sort of, actually, I mean, even those I still liked. I mean, I'm an 80s child, right? So I grew up with Arnie, sort of, I never in my wildest dreams, mate, did I imagine that I would one day sit across from him doing a scene. So that was pretty epic.
And you've had a multitude of acting roles over the years across various projects, very diverse body of work from supporting roles, but also some lead performances. So, what do you appreciate about having these opportunities to really showcase your versatility as a performer in both roles, big and small?
Mate, the goal for me has always been the same as it always was. I've been doing this a while now, and it's just to keep working, right? I mean, in my mind, being a successful actor isn't necessarily being famous, right? It's just actually to be able to pay your bills by acting. So as I don't do any other job. It's not like I work in Starbucks or McDonald's or anything like that. So I'm very fortunate to just make a living doing this. Yeah, to me, that's that's a success, and whether it's a big I've had bigger roles in like smaller movies, but sort of it's good to have. I love to even have small roles in big things, so I go from very across the board, so huge, these mega, $200 million shows, to these smaller things, sort of small indie horrors. But that's an actor's life, mate. You got to go wherever they tell you to go. So.
Yeah, and you've shared the screen with quite a few stars over the years. Of course, Arnold in this one, but other names like Bruce Willis, Mark Hamill, Rutger Hauer, Jean-Claude Van Damme. So, thinking back to all these people that you've crossed paths with, is there a particular lesson or bit of acting wisdom or something that you picked up from being on set with one of these guys that stuck with you over the years and had an impact on your career?
I think rather than an acting tip from them, because they're all very different, sort of people. These are like wildly different actors, but more like it's a personality trait that I've seen on them, which is a lot of positivity and a lot of like good work ethic. Like sort of these guys just work all the time, and you're like, yeah, and that's it. And lots of them have a story about how they were working as actors years before you would know them. Sort of like years before you recognize their first IMDb credit or anything like that. So they were, an actor for like 6, 7 years or 10 years or something that before that. So it's definitely a good idea to, they have this thing of like, it's not right place, right time. If you're just in the right place for a long time, you'll end up eventually somebody will going to see you sort of. So the idea of you being in the right place at the right time implies that you dip in and dip out. If you're actually just in the right place and you stay there, you will eventually, somebody will eventually give you a shot. And that's exactly, mate, what happened to me. I've been doing this a while. But I've been doing lots of independent projects or sort of smaller TV stuff. And, in the last couple of years, COVID has been a very good experience for me. I realize it was a very bad experience for some people, but it's been very good for me because I was in that sweet spot where I was in North America. And at a time when people couldn't travel, there was like embargoes on travel. So if they wanted a British actor, they had to find one that was already here with the right paperwork, with sort of who didn't have COVID, and so on and so forth. So that was a case of literally, I just happened to be in the right space, and they couldn't get probably who they wanted for these things, but then that's how an opportunity arises, isn't it? Something happens and then you get in the door, because the casting directors and the producers are like, yeah, we've seen him, he's been here, but he's auditioned for us before, but go ahead and let him do this, so no.
Yeah. And, in addition to acting, you've done quite a bit of directing and producing and writing. So how has this relationship between, Simon, the actor in front of the camera, and then Simon, the filmmaker behind the camera, how has that relationship evolved over the years? And what have you learned from your experiences as someone on both sides of the equation?
Yeah, a good question. I see the whole thing as a pretty collaborative process, right? So uh, you're always, I don't think the time of an actor waiting for the phone to ring for, just for a job is sort of gone. I think you have to wait, you have to kind of diversify. If you know how to do stuff, be proactive, sort of get out there. I was telling actors, I was like, just younger actors, sort of that are maybe looking for work and stuff like that, create your own work sometimes, write a script with your friends, make a movie, make a short film, whilst you're waiting between jobs. I mean, a lot of when I was younger, I used to do a lot of theater and stuff like that, but which took up all my time. But filming takes up sort of less time. You're like very busy for one week and then you're not busy the next week. So in those gaps, I would like try and work on my own projects with people or collaborate with people to create something, because eventually that turns into a movie and eventually that's something people notice, sort of. And you never know what you might be working on a very small indie film, but it might turn out to be a big success. I've had that a couple of times. We've been making these small films and they've turned out to like do way better than than you would have thought they would have done. So yeah, it's one of those things. But how it affects you know, I often think of, because I'm approaching it like an actor, a lot of times when I approach directing or producing, I kind of understand the actor's role in it, but it's good to understand the other roles in it as well, like what producers have to do, what directors have to do, what writers are sort of up against. The more you understand the nature of the beast, like the more you understand what you're doing, the more you're willing to keep learning new skills and new bits of the job, the easier it gets, so you're more informed. It's like, you're going to be a better race car driver if you understand how the engine works, and they go, well, that doesn't affect you driving. I was like, maybe it doesn't. But somehow I think if you know the ins and out of the engine and how it works, somehow I think it does make you a better driver, sort of, even though one thing might have nothing to do with the other. I don't know. It's all this understanding the same thing. So I think that's kind of my ethos on it now, how I approach it.
Right. And briefly, you mentioned there you did some theater acting when you were younger. So during those earlier days in theater performing, did you know that at some point you wanted to kind of make that transition into screen acting? Just how early were those thoughts kind of, turning around in your head?
I mean, in England, I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you become a when you go to you want to be an actor in England, you have to go to drama school. It's a bit more strict. In America, it seems like you can just be walking down the road and someone can see you and oh, I'm an actor. In England, you go to drama school and then you have to do theatre. They actually really only train you really for theatre. They sort of do that and they take you through various techniques of acting, which I won't bore you with right now. But that's the process. And then the idea is that you would transition maybe from theatre to TV actually, and then TV maybe to film. You would kind of grow. Nowadays, you can have younger actors go in straight be movie stars right from the get go, and I've done, and actually it works in reverse. They kind of do theatre later in their life. But I found, for me personally, that doing theatre first was great because there's nothing like the pressure of a live audience. And then when I was doing theatre, it was a lot of Shakespeare stuff because that's what we do in England. So Shakespeare stuff in front of a live audience where you can't mess up, and if you do mess up, you have to keep going. Is a great training for anybody. You don't get relaxed. That way, when you're on set, there's no real pressure. People go, oh, we got to try and get this in one take, and you're like, I mean, that's just theatre all the time. There's never, a second take of it. You're on stage and you've got to keep going. So it's great if you have that background. It's like you're never afraid of short time to do something, or you go, yeah, it's like you got to hit this scene, and you got to hit it hard, and you're like, yeah, that's no worries. You're just going to be in the right frame of mind, the right prep, sort of. And so I find that background is a little better.
And as you've continued as an actor throughout the industry, you've worked in both television and film, as you alluded to. And something interesting about television, if you're sticking with that character over the course of few seasons, you get a lot more time to kind of flesh out that character and get more into peeling those layers back. So, can you kind of compare your approach when you're approaching a TV character compared to a film character, and just how that affects your mindset into getting into that character?
I don't think there's the way I come at it, which is by no means everybody has their own sort of system. Is I don't think about the format that it is. Like, so the fact that it's TV or the fact that it's film doesn't really massively make a difference. That's just I leave that up to how they film it. How they edit it. Maybe that affects those things. I mean, when you're coming at it for characters, when you're reading stuff on a piece of paper, what you want to do is they go, "Oh, this guy's the bad guy." Now, that's a very simplistic way of looking at anything. And you're like, right, the challenge for an actor is to make the dialogue sort of sound real or three-dimensional. I was like, well, there's nobody just a bad guy, sort of a guy has a mom and a dad and maybe a child and a wife and stuff like that, so you got to give them color and three dimension. Even if it's not written in the script, you have to kind of imagine all these things. What is the guy like? Does he like drugs or women or drink, or like sort of, is he a funny guy? Is he a depressive guy? Is he intense? Is he and all these things you just make a bunch of decisions so that when you get in the room and you're filming the scene, it's more that you understand what it is you're doing and who you are. It's like, this is who I am, this is who you are, this is what I'm doing. It doesn't really matter about the dialogue too much, then at that point, because whatever you're saying with conviction and you just run that by the director and make sure to go, hey, I think this guy is this sort of guy, like he's in control. But then you might have other scenes, or another character, he's still a villain, right? But he's not in control, sort of like as in he's got some sort of problem, or he's, his father is actually in control and he's always been a puppet. And you can kind of feel those things, sort of if you decide them early on. So I think for me, that's when you go into, I always try to make the characters a little humorous. I always think that's a way to make a villain likable, because sometimes really what you want is the audience to maybe root for the villain sometimes, sort of maybe the villain's going to win. Now, obviously, if you're facing Arnold Schwarzenegger, you're probably not going to win, but that's okay. For that one, I don't mind losing to Arnold Schwarzenegger. But what's nice is if the audience very briefly, kind of are on your side, even it doesn't matter how small it is.
Yeah, I mean, not many people in cinematic history have stood up against Arnold Schwarzenegger and come out on top of that. So I
No,
think you're not
no,
in bad company there. Not in bad company
no,
at
no, no,
all.
no. It seemed like a hill I couldn't possibly have climbed. So don't worry, I'm
Yeah.
not worried.
Yeah. And you mentioned injecting humor into a lot of your villainous performances. There's one of your performances, one of your characters that I think is a certain type of character that most people wouldn't associate with this particular genre, but you played a kind of like a psycho Santa Claus type character.
Yeah.
So for our audience out there, can you just give a little bit of an overview on that project and how much fun you had playing such an interesting portrayal of Saint Nick?
Okay, so sometimes when you're creating characters, right, they're like, right, you're a villain, you're a drug dealer, but you're sort of human, right? Like it's like you have, you eat, sleep, sort of, you're all those things. And then every now and then a project like the one we're talking about, which is called Once Upon a Time at Christmas or The Night Before Christmas, there's actually two of these films as well. Um, and they're like, you're a psychopathic Santa Claus. And you're like, right, okay. So you're a monster, sort of you're a creature. Like you may as well be Godzilla or one of the, like sort of you're almost not human. So for one of those things, the only thing I told people about that was that when we do it is I didn't want to see he was with Mrs. Claus. Well, it was a serial killer, Mr. and Mrs. Claus, and I was like, right, and as we were discussing the project before we began, I was like, well, one of the rules we're going to have here is that you don't see him sleep. You never see him on the phone or on driving a car. You don't see him doing anything that might humanize him, sort of like a normal thing. He's got to be the monster, so you can't see him. And even though like I had a Mrs. Claus, and I was like, right, and he's also not really in love with Mrs. Claus, as in he's crazy, but they never make out, they never have sex or anything like that. I was like, it's not that we were afraid to show that sort of graphic nature of it, but nothing that makes them human. They're both really in love with each other, but they're both just killing people. It's sort of I don't know if you saw that old Brad Pitt film, sort of California, sort of with Juliette Lewis and stuff. They had a great relationship where you were like, or Natural Born Killers is another one. They had a great where they were like they were in love with each other, but it was kind of crazy, sort of. And I was like, we must go like that because that makes him unpredictable and that makes him scary. And being unpredictable is kind of scary. Because there's nothing he won't do, sort of, but that means you don't know what he's going to do as well, sort of. So, and again, if you get a chance to watch the movie, we try to inject some humor in that because it's, like madness and humor are very kind of closely linked a little bit, sort of. So, I don't know, it's great fun, and the movie was great fun to make because. I have like half of my face is burned off, and I have like a prosthetic eye. A contact over the eye, so I can see out one of my eyes. And he's going around with an axe, murdering people. Sort of. And it's good. It's good fun. You just have to not take it too seriously because it's a psycho center.
Yeah, so when you're working in roles like that, where you're covered in prosthetics or makeup, is that something that do you kind of just have to fall in love with that process and fall in love with being covered in all these things? How does that affect your mindset?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, for that movie, like it's hours and hours of makeup, every day. It's not a quick process. You're always the first person in because they need you ready. Even if they don't need you first, they need you ready. Sort of. So and that takes a while, and it can be like uncomfortable to film in those things. But I often feel a lot of the makeup and the costume in that movie or those movies does a lot of the work for you, sort of. It's like, well, it's easy to be the monster because you look like the monster. So even when you're like talking to directors or talking to other cast people, you're talking to them with this like sort of thing, and you already look like the monsters. They're already like, I noticed that people didn't talk to me like as easy. They kind of like would sort of step back a bit and go, yeah, yeah. And I knew that they were looking at the makeup and looking at the costume, and they couldn't have a regular conversation with you because they're like, sorry, you just like, I can't have lunch with you and talk about what we're doing next week because you're like kind of you're covered in this stuff. And that's good because you're halfway there. You just have to embody that, sort of thing. But it does, so it's a bit of a thing. It helps you. The other thing I'd always say to people is like, when you're a gangster, having a gun helps you a lot. Sort of it doesn't matter even if you're not using it. Sort of it's tucked in your pants or something. Is that now all of a sudden I feel like I'm a guy with a gun. Because I feel like that, then it's easier for me to convince you that that's what I'm doing. So when you get those big things, although they're a pain to do, you have to sit in the makeup chair for a long, long time. They do really help you become. It's really easy because you're halfway there on the monster because you look like a monster. So it really does help you a little bit.
And another one of your performances from a couple years ago that got some traction, got some really good praise in Butchers. And I know that's a film that you kind of have a lot of pride in. So can you walk me through a little bit of your connection to that playing that character and playing that role and just your love for that project?
Yeah, that one was another sort of just a good, very robust horror movie. So Adrian Langley, the director of that, was very kind in sort of working the story out with me and stuff like that. So he was sort of, I think he knew he was going to do something with me. He just wasn't sure what it was because we'd done a project before that where he was my director of photography, and we sort of kept in touch like that. So he was creating this sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre type movie, sort of, and it was just originally it was just me or just my character, and then I suggested that because he was looking for a big brutish kind of like something The Hills Have Eyes type character. So then we suggested that maybe there was not one person but two, and they were brothers, and that way my brother could be the big 6'4" guy who was doing all the sort of heavy lifting, and I would do the what I would call the sort of the horrific sort of dialogue, as in horrific, as in sort of like cerebral in your head. Like I found it easier, mate, as an actor to intimidate people, not with strength but with menace. Sort of like I was like the minute I put my hands on somebody, I think I've lost a bit of power. I was like, I promise you, in a scene, I could make somebody afraid of me by not shouting at them, by not touching them. Sort of. I was like, that's the sort of sinister element you're always trying to get through. I was like, I could make a girl feel very threatened like that on screen. I can do that. But the minute you have to like pick them up and like hit them and manhandle them, it's a different kind of threat. Sort of that's something else. So for that movie, it was very good. My brother was played by another wonderful actor called Michael Swan. We're both British in where we hail from. We're both from England, and we were both playing like two brothers from Alabama. We had that sort of drawl a little bit. That slack jaw sort of type thing. So it was interesting having both two Brits playing two Americans. I don't often do different different accents and stuff. If I can make the character British, I like to make it British because that's nearer to what I am, and I like to improvise, and it's much easier to improvise if you're improvising in your native tongue. But so we had me and Michael Swatton, two Brits, playing these two Alabama boys. So that was good fun. But we learned the accent from each other, because we were there. It was sort of like having a partner to help you, a scene partner. So it was lots of good fun on that movie, and it came out. Well, the execution of it was very good, and Adrian was very. It's good to have a director who knew exactly what he wanted, sort of. So that makes it easy.
And before we wrap up, I'll switch things back over to talking about Fubar. And
Mm.
this is going to be coming back to Netflix on May 25th. Just anything generally that you want to share again about working on that project and your experience working with Arnold and company.
Yeah, it's just epic. I mean, sort of, but you have to be. I think even there's something for everybody in it. Like Nick Santora, the guy who created it, is. He's just epic. Him and Dana Goldberg. I mean, look at their CVs on IMDb. They're just like everything. You're like, oh my god, So I dream of having CVs like these guys. It's just epic, and and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. So it's like what's there to Arnold Schwarzenegger action comedy in his first ever TV show. Like it doesn't need it. It doesn't even need me to sell it. I think it. I don't understand why people haven't watched it. Well, I do because it's not out yet, but it should. They should.
Oh yeah. Well, I will definitely be tuning in, and I know a lot of other people around the world will be looking forward to it as well. And yeah, so Simon, I really do appreciate your time today, and it was
Thank you,
a
mate.
pleasure to talk with you about your career. And so hopefully we share more conversations in the future.
Thank you, Thomas. Cheers now.